In this video, I'm going to show you how to use loops in Python, and we will start with the while loop. So first of all, what is a loop? So a loop allows us to repeat over some block of code again and again until and unless some condition is met. Now let's see how to use while loop in Python. So let's say I'm going to declare a variable called I, and I'm going to initialize it with the value 0. And to use a while loop, you use this keyword and then you provide some condition. So let's say I want to check whether the value inside the I variable is less than 5 or not. Okay, and as in the case of if also, we have seen we provide after the condition this colon symbol, and then in the next line we write the code which we want to perform again and again until this while loop condition is true. So let's say we want to just print something, and we will print that the value of I is, and then we will print the value of I like this. Also, I want to change the value of I with every step. So I will change the value of I using this expression, which is I plus equals 1. This essentially means that we want to just add 1 every time whenever this code is executed. Also, we can say that we want to perform this operation I is equal to I plus 1. So this statement is similar to this statement. Let me provide some spaces here. Now in here also you will observe that I have provided some indentation here, and indentation means that these two lines of code is the part of while loop. Okay, so when I want to write something outside the while loop, I will start from here with no indentation, and let's say I want to just print that we are finished. And now let me run the code and let's see what's the result. And you will see here, first of all, this string is executed, which is the value of I is, and then the value of I is printed, which is 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So as you can see here that we have initialized I is equal to 2. So the initial value of I is 0. Now when we come to this code and when this condition is checked, here the value of I is 0, which is less than 5. That means this condition is true, and that means that these two lines of code which are under while loop will be executed. So this line is executed where value of I is printed, which is I is equal to 0, and this line of code increments the value of I by 1. So when this line of code is executed, now the value of I becomes 1 because previously it was 0, and once again this program flow goes to the starting to evaluate this condition, and this time the value of I is 1, which is less than 5, and the condition is true once again, and again this line of code is executed, and this line of code is executed, and the value of I is incremented by 1 once again, and the value of I becomes 2 here, and this will happen again and again until the value of I becomes 5. And when the value of I becomes 5, this condition will be false, and that means this code will not be executed. This code will only be executed when the while loop condition is true, and then at last this line of code is printed, which is finished while loop. Now let me give you one more example of while loop, and I will start from the top once again. And this time I will declare a variable called num, and I will initialize this value by 0, and also I will declare a variable called sum, and initial value of sum is also 0. Now here first of all I will ask the user to enter a number, so I'm going to just write, and also I will ask the user if he or she wants to exit from the loop, he can enter zeros. And then in the next line I will start with my while loop, and I will give the condition if the number, so if the number, I'm going to write number, is not equals to 0, we want to perform some operations. And what operation we want to perform? we want to ask the user to provide any number, and we will transfer this number into the variable num. So here I will first of all write input, and then I will ask the user to provide the number. And when the user provides the number, I want to convert it to a float value. So I will just typecast this input to a float value, and then this number will be assigned to the variable num. Now here don't forget to give the colon, and in the next line what I will do is I will just use my sum variable, and I will just add the number value to the sum. So I can just write sum is equal to sum plus num, and this means that initially the value of sum will be 0, and then this number will be added to the sum, and until this loop runs we will get the sum of all the numbers which is entered by the user. And at last I'm going to just print the value of sum. So now what do you think will happen? So in this condition we are evaluating that num should not be equal to 0, and then only this code will be executed, and we have provided the initial value of number is equal to 0. So this condition will never be met, and this statement will never be executed. So we need to provide the initial value of num is equal to 1, and then whenever the user provides the value, this 1 will be overwritten by the value which is provided by the user. So this time when we run the code, you can see first of all the program asks us to provide a number. So I will provide 100 here and then press enter, and you can see the sum is printed which is equal to 100. Once again we will provide some number and then press enter, and now you can see sum is equal to 150. Once again we will provide one number and then press enter, and now the sum is 1050. Now let's say we provide a number is equal to 0 and then press enter. You can see that our while loop is finished because 0 is not equal to 0, that means a false condition, and then the flow of program comes out of the loop, and then the other while loop will be executed, which is this while loop, and that's why this output is printed. We can also write that sum is equal to, so we know that this is the sum, so sum equals, and then after the comma we will print the value of sum. And once again when we execute the code, and once I want to exit from the code, I can use 0 to exit. So 0 and then press enter, and I come out of this loop. Now Python also supports the else statement to be associated with the loop statement. So what I mean by the else statement to be associated with the loop statement is that I can use after the end of this while loop condition, I can use here else, and after the colon I can provide some code which I want to execute once this loop is finished. Okay, so I can write here that I want to print, for example, finished sum. So let me run the code once again, and I will quickly provide some numbers here, and which will provide the sum. And when I provide 0 here, then we come out of the loop, and you can see this finished sum string is printed using this else. So once your program comes out of the loop, this else statement will be executed. Similarly, we can go down, and here also instead of writing this finished while loop, we can also give else statement here. So I'm going to just write else, and after the colon here I need to provide the indentation. So 4 space indentation, 1 2 3 4, and everything will be okay. And once I run the code, and first of all I will provide 0 here to see if this is executed, and you can see this else condition is called once your while loop is finished. Now also you can provide some condition here which is always true. So for example, I can write true here, and this means that while loop evaluates to true every time, and this means that this statement will be executed forever. So this is also possible, but you need to think carefully, what do you want to do? Do you want to execute this code infinitely, or do you want at some time that this condition will be false? So this is how you can use while loops in Python. How to use for loops in Python. So first of all, what are for loops? So a for loop is used to iterate over a sequence, and that sequence can be a list or a tuple or a dictionary or a set or a string. So for that, I'm going to declare some variables, and the first variable is A, which is a list. Second variable is B, which is a tuple. Third is C, which is a set. Fourth is a string, and fifth variable is E, which is a dictionary. Now before seeing the syntax of for loop, I'm going to show you how to use in operator in Python because it's used in for loop. So I'm going to first of all use print, and then I'm going to use 0 and then use in operator, and then I'm going to use this first variable which is A, which is a list, right? And let's see what happens when I try to run this code. So it prints true. So in operator will give you true or false depending upon whether this value is present in your sequence or not. So for example, when I write 100 here, which is not present in the list, it's going to return us false. So this you can use with the tuple also. Let me just use it with tuple, and let's use 1 here, and I'm going to run the program, and it prints true once again. Also we can use in operator with strings, so I can write D here, but for that I need to convert this 1 into a string. So now when I run the code, it will give me true. Now let's see how to use a for loop in Python. So for loop, as I said, we can use with some sequence. So let's use it with A, which is a list. So I can write X in A, and A is a list in this case, and then I can just print the value of X, and let's see what happens first of all when we just write this kind of a for loop. So we are going to run the program, and what it does is it prints the values from 0 to 5, which is the element present inside the list. So for loop is going to iterate over your list one by one, and this in operator is going to check whether this value is there in your sequence or not, in this case in our list or not. So first of all, when for loop start, it will transfer the first value, which is 0, into X, and then it checks whether X is in this list A or not, and then it's going to print the value of X, which is 0. And once again program sequence goes here, and once again the next value is transferred to X, which is 1, and once again this condition is validated if 1 is in this list A or not, and then the value of X is printed, which is 1, and this iteration goes on until 5 is reached, which is the last value in the list. So 5 is printed, and after that there is nothing inside X, and then the program flow comes out of this loop. You can also use this for loop with the tuple also. So let's try it with tuple, and let's see what happens. And it's going to print the same values. Also with the set, let's see what happens. So I'm going to run the program once again, and it prints 0 to 5 once again, because these are the content of the set also. Once again, let's try to use this for loop with the string, and let's see what happens. And it's going to print out the content of this string, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it prints them one by one. Now with the dictionary, we use this for loop in a little bit different way. So for example, I will write the variable name, which is a dictionary, and then let's say I want to just print all the keys inside this dictionary. Then I can write e.keys, and then we have all the keys using this function, and when I run the code, it's going to print all the keys inside your dictionary. Also, when you use the function called dot values, it's going to print out all the values inside your dictionary. You can see max and the age 20. Now let's say you want to print out all the key value pairs which are there in your dictionary. You can use a function called items, and this is going to give you keys and values, right? So I can just write key, comma, value here, and then I can print the value of key. First of all, key, and let's provide some space here, and then let's print out the variable value here. Okay, and when I run the code, it's going to give you first of all key and then the value, once again key and then the value. So in order to print out the keys and values from a dictionary, you can use this kind of notation. Now you can also use a function called range. So let me show you how to use this function, which is range, which returns us the values starting from 0. So there is a function called range here, and in here you can provide a number, and this range is going to return the number starting from 0 to 5. So whatever number you write here, the range will be returned from 0 until that number except whatever number you write here. Okay, so let me just try to print out the values which is there in the X, and when I try to print this, it's going to return me from 0 to 5. And you can see here 6 is not printed because the range will give us the value except that value which you write here. You can also provide the start value here. So let's say I want to start from 2 and I want to go until 5. I can write something like this, and now you can see now it start printing from 2 to 5. Also you can give a third parameter here, which is a step parameter. So I can give 3 here, for example, and let's say I want to write 30 here, and let's run the code. And now what is going to return is it starts from 2 because we have given the start value 2 here, and it's going to go until 29 because we have given 30 value here, right? And this is the step. So every third value will be printed after 2 here. So 5 will be printed, then 8, then 11, 14, 17, 20, 23, 26 and 29. Every third value, right? If you write here 2, then we will increment in the step of 2. So this is how you can use range function with your for loop. Also, as I said in the last video, you can use else statement with your loops. So I can also write else here, and then after the colon in the next line I can print something, or I can execute some statement. So for now I will just print finished, and then I'm going to run the code, and once the loop is finished, you can see this else statement is executed, which prints finished. So else statement will be executed once your for loop is finished. So in this way you can use for loops in Python. How you can use break and continue keywords with your Python loops. So to start with, I have here 2 loops. One is a for loop and other is a while loop. Now this for loop takes a list and then print every element out of this list using this print function. In a similar way, while loop evaluates the value of I. If it's less than 5, then it's going to print the value of I and then increment the value of I by 1. Now this is all normal and we have already seen this kind of code. Now you can use a break keyword with your loops in order to terminate the execution of loop immediately. So let's see how we can use break keyword first, and then we will see how to use continue keyword. So here I'm going to give a condition inside my for loop, and I'm going to just evaluate whether x is equal to 3 or not, and if x is equal to 3, I'm going to use this break keyword. In the same way, I'm going to use this if condition inside my while loop also, but instead this time I'm going to evaluate I is equal to 3, and if I is equal to 3, then I'm going to use this break inside this if condition. So let's run the code and let's see what happens. And you can see in the for loop it has only printed 0, 1, 2. Even though this for loop is supposed to print from 0 to 5, it has printed until 2 from 0, because as soon as this x value becomes 3 and we call break here, the loop is terminated immediately and our program will come out of the loop immediately as soon as this break keyword is called. In the case of this while loop also, as soon as this I value becomes 3, we are calling the break keyword, and as soon as this break keyword is called, our loop is broken and the execution of code will come out of this loop. So until 2 everything was okay, but as soon as the value becomes 3, this break is called and then we come out of the loop. Let me just print a line here in order to separate these two loops, so we know that from where one is starting, right? So I'm going to once again run the code, and you can see for loop prints from 0 to 2 and also while loop prints from 0 to 2. If you change the value here, for example here you want to evaluate x is equal to 2 or not, and here you want to evaluate if x is equal to 4 or not, and then you break out of the loop. And once again when I run the code, you can see the for loop runs only 2 iterations for 0 and 1, and as soon as the value of x becomes 2, we call the break keyword and we come out of this loop. And in the case of while loop, as soon as this value of I becomes 4, we come out of the loop. So the value from 0 to 3 is printed. Now let's see how we can use a continue keyword instead of this break keyword. So instead of this break keyword, I will use a keyword called continue here, and also in the while loop also I'm going to use this keyword called continue, and I'm going to run the program and let's see what happens. So now when you see here, so you can see here for loop starts from printing 0, 1, and as soon as the value of x becomes 2, this condition is met and this continue is called, and as soon as this continue keyword is called, everything whatever code comes after this continue keyword will be skipped and your program execution goes once again to a for loop for the next value. So you can see in case where x is equal to 2 and continue is called, this statement is not executed, because as soon as we execute continue in our loop, then that iteration is skipped and all the code after the continue will not be executed. Okay, so we go to the next iteration. So that's why 2 is not printed, because this was skipped in case of 2, and then directly 3 is printed and then 4 and 5 is printed. In case of while loop also, as soon as the value of I becomes 4, you can see 4 is not printed here. You can also change this value to 2, and then I'm going to run the program once again, and you can see while loop prints 0, 1, and why it prints 0 and 1. So because as soon as the value of I becomes 2, this continue keyword is called, and after that this iteration is skipped, and also because this iteration is skipped, these two lines of code are not executed, and because this line of code is not executed, that's why the value of I is not incremented and the value of I always remains 2, and that's why this becomes an infinite loop, right? So instead of increment the value of I at the last line, we can increment the value of I just after this condition check whether I is less than 5 or not, and then we run the code. Now you can see it prints 1, 3, 4 and 5. So now what's happening here is initially the value of I is equal to 0 and this condition is evaluated, and then we first increment the value by 1, and that's why it starts with the printing of 1 by using this print function. And as soon as I is equal to 2, this continue is called, and that's why here 2 is not printed, because as soon as the value of I becomes 2, this continue is called, and every code or every statement after the continue will be skipped for that iteration. That's why 2 is not printed here. So in this way you can use break and continue keywords with loop. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next video.